YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. This is another one of my videos in the series of kind of like the what if series, not revolving around like what if TV show series and like the plots of the show and stuff. I might pick that up someday, but kind of what if scenarios for the Power Rangers brand. I've done ones of like what if Disney kept it, what if Saban kept it, what if Hasbro was successful, and the last one I did, which was the one was like what if Hasbro had actually done the reboot and not put things on ice. And on that video I got a comment, and I can't remember the name off the top of the head, but I'm going to put a little screen grab up to give you credit. They gave me a really interesting prompt for one I never thought about, which is what if Power Rangers never existed? Well, then obviously we would get three ghosts of like Christmas, past, present, and future to show us what would happen. Now, this is kind of what that's like. Well, sort of. Now, this is an interesting one because I think it more has an impact on, I think, kind of raising the question of like, what would that mean for like Toku? I think primarily I'm going to focus on Sentai and Rider, and like if we were to look at a timeline where PR never was here and we never made it, never anything like it at all, not talking about like what if somebody else did a Power Rangers, like nobody did anything ever, then what would it look like in regards to like the Western fandom of Sentai and Rider? Well, we wouldn't have Sentai purists at least. That would be kind of great, like the people acting like they aren't also Western fans, like, you don't understand the brilliance of tokusatsu. Dude, you live in Ohio. I think that's interesting because this is, yet again, like all the other situations, we can never know for sure. There's so many variables, none of us really know. We can only speculate. And this is one where I'd say there's almost a 50-50 chance of like success and like no success. I personally think the chances are very low of Toku becoming something like anime, where it's almost mainstream absorbed into like Western culture. You know, a lot of people love anime stuff now. You know, when I was growing up, it was definitely around, but it was kind of more like Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Digimon, to the point where like when I was younger, I didn't even think about that as anime. Like, I still don't think about the Pokemon anime as the Pokemon anime. I just think it as the Pokemon cartoon because I didn't think about it that way. But that was around, but it's only in the last decade, I want to say, maybe more, maybe less, that anime's become much more of a mainstream thing to talk about. You know, you see merchandise for Naruto and One Piece and Dragon Ball and, oh my god, Attack on Titan, like all that stuff. It's become much more mainstream of a thing. And I don't see that. I just can't see that. I don't know why. Like, I think it could be bigger than it is now, possibly, but I just can't imagine it would be on that level. You never know. I just don't think so. However, I do think there's a scenario where some of it could have something in that arena. Like, I think it would still be niche, but I think that there could be more eyeballs on it. I specifically think more so Kamen Rider, because like, especially when I was watching Geats last year, I was thinking, you know, I could see people really getting into this, like non-Toku fans getting into it, because it is really cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff in it. You know, there's still some stuff that people might not like here that doesn't translate, but also it just could be really cool. And I think that there is potential for that to grow its own little section. Like I said, I don't see it as being as big as like you're gonna have a Geats shirt at Hot Topic or something. Now, someone's going to show me there's a Kamen Rider shirt at Hot Topic. I know we do have stuff like at GameStop sometimes, but you know what I mean. I don't see it becoming the next Attack on Titan. But I could see it becoming its own little subgenre here that's kind of similar, like in vein to anime, in terms of like you would have a bigger fandom and there would be something of an appetite to put it on streaming services or making it accessible, more DVDs, more merchandise. Specifically with Kamen Rider, because I think of Kamen Rider and Sentai right now, Sentai, I don't know why I said it like that, in terms of the timeline we live in where Power Rangers exists, I think its biggest obstacle is Power Rangers, because most people will see it and think, oh, that's just Power Rangers, which infuriates the purists, and it's like, get over it, you gatekeepers. I don't care if you refer to any Kamen Rider as a Power Ranger, if that's your shorthand. It's being elitist about something that's like not worth being elitist about. But anyway, my point is with that though is like, we've talked about this ad nauseum, that the reputation of Power Rangers in the general public is not great. Of course, you do have the people that are nostalgic, like it was my childhood, Tommy Forever, but then they're also like, that's garbage, I'm going to use it as a shorthand for of poor quality. Can't blame you, sir, can't blame you. But that's the reputation, and so they'll see that and think, oh, that's just Power Rangers, and they'll just immediately think cheesy garbage. And that's kind of the position we're in. And so I think that's a kind of a wall for a lot of people. Now, I say that I think Kamen Rider could be more successful because I think Sentai still shares some of the things that people don't like about PR now watching it through an older lens. Like, yes, I know it's mature, they get blood on their lips sometimes, there was beer in a scene once, I know it's super edgelord stuff, but I think that it's not impossible that Sentai could find an audience, but I think stuff like Kamen Rider would likely be more ripe for that, because kind of like anime, it's a lot more serialized, you can get into it like, oh my god, gotta watch the next episode factor, whereas even some of the more serialized Sentai are very episodic. Now, obviously there's an audience for like slice of life type of stuff, but I just think you'd have an easier time catching on because I think the cool factor kind of plays into writer more, although not so much currently, but you know what I mean. I just think that you have more check marks that could get people into it, that would get people into like the plot and the serialization and all that stuff. Whereas with Sentai, you know, you see a lot of those things that people would make fun of, and I could see people in the timeline where Power Rangers didn't exist still making fun of it and seeing it as silly, or seeing it as what it is, which is a children's show, which both of them are, but Rider just feels like one that you could get older audiences in, whereas I think that Sentai would still face that battle of being perceived as silly and cheesy, and which it is, but you know what I mean. That's just kind of the way I feel, primarily based on a couple times I've seen the general public react to some Sentai stuff. I remember last year, like, it blew up. People were like upset that people were making fun of King Oger when it like made the rounds in some like normal circles or whatever. And so I could just totally see that happening. That's kind of what I'm thinking, is that, again, not impossible, because you wouldn't have the Power Rangers thing tied to it. I think a lot of people now either don't know what Sentai is. I think because of the internet, most people know it comes from a Japanese show, but I think they just don't care to find out any more about it because they have such a low opinion of PR. But again, because I've seen people react to Sentai elements in a similar way, I think it would still face an uphill battle and be kind of seen like that. Again, I think it could find an audience, but I think in terms of finding possibly bigger success, I think Rider would be the most benefited from it, because obviously, you know, it's related. It's Toku, it's related, but it also is very different in a lot of ways, and the designs are very different in a lot of ways. So you wouldn't have that aspect of people thinking, that's Power Rangers, and they would be able to, in that universe where PR not existed, go into Kamen Rider basically clean, without any preconceived notion, and actually be able to see like the cool parts about it and be engaged by the serialized plots. And obviously we've seen that like Ultraman and stuff has been getting a little bit more traction. I wouldn't say it's like mainstream, not in the sense that, I mean, I think a lot of mainstream people know who Ultraman is, but I don't think it's like on the level of like, again, Attack on Titan and stuff like that. So we've seen it's possible, and I think Ultraman has a more unique position, and also stuff like Godzilla, which is also a little bit different, but I think that has a unique position. But I think it would be possible for stuff like Kamen Rider, like Ultraman, and that stuff to be more popular. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible for Sentai, but just because I've kind of seen that cross-reaction, I could see people still seeing Sentai as a little bit lesser, and not impossible, just more difficult. And I think they would still have that perception, just in a different way. But it is interesting to think about, because I also think that there's a chance that even though we have stuff like anime blowing up, and I don't think Power Rangers existing had any effect on that whatsoever, I could also see a reality where it has even less of a presence. You know, I think people will often, especially the purists, draw Power Rangers in a negative light. You know, the Sentai purists are like Leslie's Eagleton friend in season 3 of Parks and Recreation, where she comes from Eagleton, or she comes from Pawnee, excuse me, and she moves to Eagleton, and she pretends she never went to Pawnee. So many Sentai purists, you know you started with PR, but now you act like you're too good for it because you're watching Sentai. So many fans, Sentai fans, like to treat Power Rangers like it's this villain for Sentai. But the reality is it drew in a lot of the Toku community that we have today, a lot of the Western fandom. I would say the lion's share of it. Whether it's directly or indirectly, whether it was somebody that grew up with PR or know what it was and checked it out, or because they checked out Rider and Sentai when they were older that they recommended it to somebody, I would be willing to bet that the lion's share of Western Toku fans, especially here in the US, are because of Power Rangers. So while yes, MMPR's reputation and perception has had a negative connotation on like kind of a wall being put up for checking out something like Kamen Rider, it's also made it a lot more available in the public consciousness. Made the fans today that are watching Sentai and Rider probably a major reason why a lot of people know what Sentai or Kamen Rider are, even if they've only like just simply know what it is or only watched a couple episodes. So I think that it could go either way. I think without, to sum it up, thesis statement, I think without MMPR's poor reception, I do think the doors could be open for Toku to develop kind of a nice little subgenre. I mean, you know what I mean, of like kind of, you know, Japanese TV that people would get into, like anime. I think it could open up a possibility. I think it's possible. I think it would be a little bit more of an uphill battle for Sentai, but I think it's possible. But I could also equally see it being a situation where you probably would still have fans, but I think without Power Rangers drawing that eyeballs, there might not be as much of an appetite for it, or people wanting to even check it out, because Power Rangers was a pop culture phenomenon. It's not simply like, oh, it was a one-off couple season show they did here for time. It was like people forget about that, I think, when talking about MMPRs. It wasn't just the first and the most popular. It was a moment in pop culture, and that's why it's able to still be known today, which then draws a direct link to people being able to have knowledge about Sentai and Toku. So, I don't know. I think that's really interesting because unlike some of the scenarios I've gone over where I think one is more likely than the other, I think depending on variables, it's almost a 50-50 shot. But what do you guys think? What do you think that would look like? Do you think that it would open up more possibilities or less possibilities if PR never existed for fans to be opened up to Sentai, Kamen Rider, and other Toku? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Awesome Rider, signing out.